Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. Saturday night, October 31st, 2020. It's also the full moon, Wan Pra, the observance day, so we had our Patimokkha recitation earlier up on the hill. And so the year is just wearing on. We're getting into autumn and time change tonight. So Sunday morning, 2 a.m. becomes 1 a.m. And meal time change. Whenever the time change happens, we change the time of our meal. So for the kitchen to know that starting tomorrow we have the meal at 10:45 instead of 11. And that'll be that way through the winter time, winter retreat, until the time change happens again. And then traditionally we have our late night vigil. This has been optional for most of this year. And no different tonight. It'll be, anybody can stay up if they like, but then I urge people, if they have any feeling under the weather, any sense of sickness that can happen when change of weather, change of season. It can be various maladies. So to make sure to rest enough if anyone's feeling unwell. There's so much to talk about with the Dhamma, sometimes don't really know where to begin. There's just so many threads that could be picked up, and the Dhamma is just so amazing, and the Buddha is so amazing, and it's just feel a lot of gratitude. And having come here to Abhayagiri at the age of 20 and being 40 now, so going on half my life in a monastery, in monasteries, and having almost run away hundreds of times. I'm glad I didn't, and glad to still be here. And I kind of reflect on those times I wanted to run away and just get away from the monastery. And some of the times it was the strongest was when I believed my critical mind. And then once there was some usually like the antidote for that would be putting space around it. So, but those times that I really bought into my critical mood or critical mind, then it made it seem very real. And then once it passed away, it was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't follow that. I'm really glad I didn't follow that. Just like sometimes when we get in this state, we just have to like play it out in the mind to its logical conclusion. And what would actually happen? But when the mind is in that state, it's not always rational or logical. So then the antidote is putting space around it. Or there is some sort of logic, but it's the logic of the defilements. And they have their own logic. It's the logic that ends in suffering. So, what do we need? What do we need to keep going, keep practicing? And we're living at a time in history which is no different than any other time in history. And so it's just kind of timeless. This is akaliko. The Dhamma is always around. It's always around us. It always is us. Living Dhamma. And it's dynamic. So like when we talk about cultivating insight or vipassana wisdom, it's not something that it's like you get the right bit of knowledge or you read the right phrase in the right book and you can get the multiple choice exam correct. You know, it's not that kind of knowledge, but it's life knowledge, it's heart knowledge, it's dynamic knowledge. So with Dhamma, it's like skillful response. Panya is like skillful response to any situation. And that's also vipassana. Liberating insight is the translation of vipassana. And the Buddha gave this set of dhammas, the 4 Iddhipadas, and said that this is a special set of dhammas that if you cultivate them, then you can actually achieve anything, either worldly or spiritual. And so it starts with chanda. The 4 Iddhipadas, they go chanda, viriya, citta, vīmaṃsā. That's the Pali. Chanda is like desire or a determination. So, but this isn't quite the same as like, there is a belief nowadays where it's like if you desire something enough, you'll just get it. And you just like make more and more, you make yourself have more and more desire for it. And then it'll like appear for you eventually. But the Buddha takes it to the next step. He says, viriya. So chanda, there's these, it's translated as desire, but also it's not tanha. It's not the same as tanha. So like, tanha never really has positive connotations. Tanha is like the cause of suffering, the kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. That's the craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving not to become, or craving for annihilation. So those 3 types of tanha being the cause of dukkha. But then the Buddha talks about chanda, and chanda can be either positive or negative, and it has a slightly different emphasis than tanha. The way I think about tanha is like it's got like a drunken or an intoxicated quality to it, a bewildered quality to it. And chanda has like a moving forward quality to it, or like an aim to it. It's more focused. So you can have kama chanda, which is like your intent on sensual pleasures. So there's this, it's different than kama tanha, which is like a sort of intoxication with sensual pleasures, where like kama chanda would be more like an intentness, or you're going for it, kind of sensual pleasures, sensual desire. But then there's dhamma chanda. That's what we're looking for in this instance. So dhamma chanda is like desire for dhamma, desire for cultivation. And it's also like when we see things like bhava tanha, like craving to become, like, okay, I have to stop becoming. But that's vibhava tanha, and so what do? So it's like bhavana, though, the word bhavana, which is practice, cultivation, means to bring into being. And so we might wonder, like, well, what are all these duplicities in the Buddha's teachings? Like he's saying, like, don't have tanha, but have chanda, and don't have becoming, but bring into being with bhavana. So, but the Buddha's teaching, it's very kind of nuanced, and the Dhamma is alive and subtle. And a lot of the ways the Buddha taught, it was both very precise, but also poetic and sometimes layered meanings. It's like the Buddha had this realization into the way things are, the truth of the way things are, and he's actually working with energies. And when he's formulating his teaching, just looking at these different energies and saying, well, what is that energy? What is that energy? What is this energy? And trying to describe it. No description actually touches on what it is, but he's trying to come at it from different angles. So it's like, yeah, there's kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha as the cause of suffering, and how did I get to the ending of suffering? It was through the cultivation of the path, it was through bhavana, and what sort of qualities caused him to awaken? Well, there was this intense desire for awakening. There was this firmness, determination of purpose. So, like a one-pointedness of purpose. So there was this strong Dhamma chanda. So we have like a strong desire to achieve something, to bring something into being, to strive for something. And then we have viriya, which is energy. And one description of the Buddha's own teaching, he called it a way of energy. So it's viriya, that's energy, effort, in terms of fulfilling our Dhamma chanda, our desire for the spiritual, our desire for Dhamma. It's a special type of viriya. It's the energy to overcome that which is unwholesome, bring into being that which is wholesome. And unwholesome is defined as it causes suffering. Wholesome is defined as It brings states of ease, well-being, happiness. And then citta. Citta is like applying one's whole mind and heart, applying one's whole being to it. And then vīmaṃsā is reviewing and what worked, what didn't work, what worked in that particular meditation, that particular practice. How could I be adjusting and adapting to next time this happens. So reviewing what happened there, where did I get lost, where did I slip up, did I have a sense of ease and well-being, how did that arise, what was that coming from, what sort of factor was in play there. So this can be kind of like a mantra for ourselves. This chanda, viriya, citta, vīmaṃsā can be very helpful to think about. And I guess we can't really go by Halloween without talking about death. So also that's another important factor, important thing to think about. And not just death, but aging. Aging it culminates in death. And this is very important to think about in terms of just cutting through whatever proliferations, especially unwholesome proliferations, cutting through any sort of maybe it'll be better later on. Just coming back to the present. I remember we had this Q&A, this live FaceTime Q&A with Ajahn Ñāṇiko a couple years back, and he was coming back to death contemplation a lot. So we had this Q&A, and somebody asking a question about the mind is just all over the place. And he just answered with just death contemplation, because it just makes things so immediate and it brings things back to the present. It makes me think also of this Luangpo Cha teaching where he talks about his own practice, and he said when he was practicing, he lived just for this day. So we put our heart into whatever is happening this day. And when we practice like that, we never really get bored. We never really get bored. So there's always something to be doing in the practice. It's like there's always something to be cultivating, something to be contemplating. But this isn't like a frantic doing. It's like there's a sense of ease to be cultivated. If there's not a sense of ease, then there's a sense of ease that needs to be cultivated. So that's like the fourth step of Anapanasati, consciously calming the whole body. So just consciously coming into a sense of ease. Maybe even testing ourselves, playing with ourselves, like how much of the day can we abide in a sense of ease? And what parts of the day do we feel a sense of dis-ease? We all have our daily rhythms, everybody's different. So some people might be morning people, some people might be evening people. And what time of the day do I feel the most ease? What times of the days do I feel the least sense of ease? And looking at that, working on that. It's like for myself, I can say like, there's teaching that's quoted a lot, like if you're going to point something out to somebody, like don't do it before the meal, wait till after the meal. But for myself, I'm the most irritable after the meal. I feel better. I feel better before the meal. So like, so knowing that about myself, it's like for myself the best thing is to get away quickly after the meal. And then morning time I'll feel okay. Evening time, tea time is good, but just after the meal, it's like, okay, that's what would be skillful for me after the meal is just alone time. That's not really the best time to, necessarily be meeting with people. Of course, a lot of times I have to, and that's just what the schedule, what's there in the schedule, and just make the best of it, make the most of it. But in terms of the inner feeling, it's like, okay, after the meal is a good time to be out in the forest. So everybody will have something different. And then we also have monthly and annual rhythms. And so like some people may have had like trauma at a certain time of year, and it comes up every year. I've seen that before. So learning or knowing how to work with that. Also, people tend to underestimate the effect the weather has on them. So like, it's pretty easy now, like to see like, okay, how's everybody doing? And then like check what the weather's doing. It's, oh, okay, yeah, right. That's predictable. It's like I've had times where it's like, a lot of us are feeling kind of glum, and people are expressing like, oh yeah, I'm feeling kind of depressed, kind of glum. It's like, okay, it's been really dark, it's raining, so checking the weather, yeah, it's raining, it's dark outside, and it's cold, and then like the sun comes out the next day, and it's like, oh yeah, good, that passed away, I'm feeling better now. So it's like, okay, the sun is out. So just like noticing the effect our external environment can have on us. That's also vīmaṃsā, that's also reviewing, seeing like, and investigating. Another way, I think, to consider death contemplation or think about death is it helps to cut through a sense of importance that we give to things, I guess. Maybe more like a sense of cutting through like our sense of self-importance, but it's not just that. It's also like being heavy-hearted, taking things in a very heavy way. Death contemplation can cut through that. It can bring like a sense of lightness, lightheartedness, and a sense of ease, that very sense of ease that we're always trying to come back to and make that our baseline. And I think the reason it really cuts through the sense of giving a lot of importance to things is we can think like, well, 100 years from now, not a single one of us will be sitting here unless we're like some sort of Guinness Book, like old age holder or something. But it's pretty safe to say 100 years from now, none of us will be alive. And so what's the point? Why are we here? And from 100 years ago, or we'll say 150 years ago, anyone who was alive at that time has passed away. And this is just always happening. It's all around us. It's everywhere. It's inside of us. And it's like the time Luang Por Chah was staying in the charnel ground, and he had so much fear of death coming up that it eventually broke. The fear went to the ultimate point, and he was looking at the fear, and eventually it got so extreme that it was like, but it was a condition. He saw that it was a condition. No condition is infinite. Every condition, no matter how extreme it is, it's always just that much. It can't go to an ultimate point. There is no ultimate in the conditioned realm, so it's always just arising and passing away. And this is also the insight into anicca. But then he started asking himself, like, where is death? Where is it? And having this really strong insight that it was within him. For all of us, death is within us. And so that's quite an insight, It's so kind of obvious, it's so kind of the way things are, but it's still, it's a profound insight. And we know we will die. I mean, to not die is an impossibility. It goes against the law of nature. Even if some new machine was invented, and it was able to keep us alive for like 1,000 years, still we would die. Either the machine would break down at some point, or we would just be like, it would be so old that, it wouldn't matter. But so we know we're going to die at some point. And so that's the knowing aspect of it. We can be sure of that. There doesn't have to be any doubt about that. So that's the knowing aspect of Marananusati. And then there's a not knowing aspect, which is we don't know when it will happen. It's absolutely uncertain when it will happen. Could be later tonight, could be a year from now, could be 50 years from now. We don't know. But it will happen at some point. We have no idea when. And so that is not to instill fear. The point of death contemplation is not to instill fear into us, although it could bring up the fear of death, like it did for Luang Por Chah. But it's to bring us back into the present, and also to cause us to think about what's important for me to be doing right now. What's the bhavana right now? What's to be brought into being right now? Do I have a sense of ease right now, or do I have a sense of dis-ease right now? So like what's actually important in the moment? If we can do that, then in a sense we're meditating all the time. We can keep our meditation practice going all the time. There's certain kind of tricks tips, I guess, as well, too, to like, it's a very important teaching for us Westerners, that not to get into the kind of self-judgment or judging others. This idea of judgment is very important to cut through with the death contemplation. Been rereading some teachings that I really love. Patrol Rinpoche, and he was kind of like the Tibetan version of the Tudong monk, and lived in the 1800s and never had a fixed monastery, so wandered around Tibet and was rereading some stories and anecdotes about his life, and he's got some really good teachings, and it just makes me think of the Thai Krupa Ajahns. It's just so similar. But one thing I read recently, which struck me, was, he says, it's actually his disciple. His disciple, it's a teaching from one of his closest disciples. And his disciple is saying, because this is how they got these stories, was from, they couldn't get it from Patrol Rinpoche himself, but they got it from his disciples and the disciples of his disciples who are still alive. And it's one of his closest disciples was like, yeah, practicing with Patrol Rinpoche, it was really difficult, and there was a lot of hardships, and requisites were hard to come by. But we really put our heart into the practice, and we had a sense of ease and well-being. He said, but in more recent times, the requisites are in abundance, and people have a better situation, but they don't put their heart into the practice the same way. And when you have a good situation, don't waste your time. Really use that good situation to practice as much as you can. And then after that is a teaching by Patrol Rinpoche where he says, anybody can benefit from the Dhamma, it's just most people just don't practice enough. So when you do a lot of practice, when you do a lot of meditation, when you do a lot of reflection, a lot of contemplation, you actually do these practices and you do it enough, and you have to do it a lot. And when you do it a lot, then you get the benefit. But Patrol Rinpoche is saying, like, the problem is most people don't do it a lot. We practice only a little. So practicing only a little, we're not going to get the benefit. But we practice year after year. Viriya, the dogged perseverance needed to just keep on track, stay the course. Sometimes for myself, wanting to leave, it's just like, okay, just stay the course, just stay the course, just stay the course. Literally proliferating about how I was going to run away in the middle of the night. It's just, okay, just stay the course, stay the course, stay the course. That can be the mantra if we need it. Kind of death contemplation coming up, like what if I ran away and died in a car accident driving out of the exit of the monastery? Or just like, that actually could happen. So, okay, just stay the course, stay the course, stay the course. Bhutto, bhutto, bhutto. Just come back to bhutto, bhutto. I found sometimes all the time actually, it's good to do bhutto. Bhutto is a really good meditation mantra. And I like to think of it's O rather than A. So like Buddha Buddha is the external Buddha, but Buddho is the inside Buddha, so it's like bringing it in. And something that's really good to do, if people haven't tried it yet, is when you wake up in the morning, say you might have been dreaming or something, and the mind is not so clear and maybe wandering a bit, establishing that sense of ease as soon as possible with Buddho. So I found, like, when I wake up in the morning and if my mind is like not so clear and it might be going into negativity a little bit, if I just like force Buddho into there, it's like the sense of ease gets established really pretty quickly. So it's like just putting a meditation word in there actually it really just cuts through whatever the thinking process is doing. And good to do in the morning because it's kind of like, it might be kind of all over the place, and so the Buddho can cause like a sense of focus, a bit of a sense of focus, mindfulness to arise. Good way to start the day. And it's a good way to end the day as well, with Buddho. Going to sleep, Buddho. And if we have trouble falling asleep, we can just do Buddho meditation. We could do lying down meditation. This is the Yoga Nidra. Some of our senior ajahns, one in particular that Longpa Viradamo talks about, the lying down meditation. So if we can't fall asleep, we can do lying down meditation, gain some benefit from that, or if we accidentally drank a cup of coffee at tea time or something and we can't fall asleep, we can just say, okay, well, I'll just lay here awake and meditate, not even try to fall asleep. That sense of ease and Buddho, also the death contemplation, I found it can give rise to a sense of wishing well for oneself and others. So it also helps with the metta kammatthana, the metta practice, the spreading of goodwill. The death contemplation can really help with that. May you be at ease. It'll be like when we have a sense of ease, it'll be natural to say, like, may you be at ease. Just have that thought for people. How we relate to ourselves also tends to be the way we relate to others. So if we're like wishing ourselves, may I be at ease, it's going to be more natural to wish others, may you be at ease. If we're judgmental and critical with ourselves, it's going to tend to be judgmental and critical of others. Not always, but that's generally seems to be how it works. Hating ourselves, we might hate others. So trying to get that sense of sense of ease, developing sense of ease for oneself. It's vital, super important. But we have to want to do it. All these things, we have to want to do it. If we don't want to have a sense of ease, if we don't want to do the death contemplation, then we won't do it. We won't put the requisite effort into it, and we won't therefore gain the benefit from it. So chanda, we have to want to do it. And the Buddha also said with the four Iddhipadas that chanda, all four of them, but starting with chanda, is coupled with samadhi. So there's a sense of one-pointedness of purpose there. And samadhi doesn't just mean like a laser-pointed focus and excluding everything, although certain types of samadhi can be like that. But it's the one-pointedness of purpose. It's a determination of purpose. It's a one-pointedness of theme. We can be one-pointed on the death contemplation. We can be one-pointed on body contemplation, on metta. We can be one-pointed on all these things. There's like the knowing aspect of death contemplation and the not knowing aspect. The knowing aspect being knowing we'll die, the not knowing aspect meaning we don't know when, can't be sure when. The Buddha, I was rereading some of the suttas in the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha also talks about, it's quite interesting, he talks about some of his experiences with his second teacher. So before he was awakened, he practiced with Alara Kalama and then with Uddaka Ramaputta. And he talks about something that Uddaka Ramaputta was teaching, which kind of gives insight into how they were attaining these super refined states of the. With Uddaka Ramaputta, in particular was the absorption, the arupa jhana of the neither perception nor non-perception. And so the Buddha talks about that a little bit. He said, when Uddaka Ramaputta taught, one of the things he taught was seeing yet not seeing. And that was the contemplation. Seeing yet not seeing. And you were supposed to hold that when he was practicing under Uddaka Ramaputta, that was the perception you were supposed to be holding. And the way he taught that was seeing yet not seeing was to look at a razor blade. And when you looked at the razor blade, you could see the razor blade, but you couldn't see the edge. And that was your contemplation of seeing yet not seeing. And then the Buddha says, yes, that's one type of contemplation, but he was teaching about a material object, a mere razor, and yet I also talk about seeing, yet not seeing. So he says, how do Buddhas talk about seeing, yet not seeing? So we talk about seeing the Four Noble Truths, yet not seeing the defilements. So that's the seeing, yet not seeing of the Buddhas. So that's the seeing of the Four Noble Truths, full insight into the Four Noble Truths. And when that happens, there's a not seeing of the defilements of greed, hatred, delusion. And so he's taking something, I found that I was very moved by this teaching because he's taking something which, in a sense, what Uddaka Ramaputta was teaching was actually profound. But it was like for a worldly state of samadhi, and yet the Buddha's taking that same contemplation and saying, well, that exists also, but this is in insight, this is in Dhamma that we're using this. So we want this, we want this. This is chanda. This is Dhamma chanda. And we want to figure it out. This is viriya. This is citta. Why didn't it work yet? Why am I not there yet? What's the hindrance? What hindrances are arising? What's kind of keeping the mind from purity? That's vīmaṃsā. So these four Iddhipada, there's just so many ways we can use them, and a lot of the teachings, they really lead back to the four Iddhipada because it's really the nitty-gritty, the bare bones practice the Buddha's coming back to.